covering the stories that impact your life, your town, your state, and your future. This is the Means Report with your host, Brad Means.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Means Report. We are so grateful for your time today. Another busy agenda as we try to keep you, the voting public, informed as Election Day gets ever closer. In fact, early voting, absentee voting, all that stuff's about to get cranked up in the very near future. And today we're going to talk to Congressman Doug Collins, one of the candidates for Georgia's Senate seat, formerly occupied by Johnny Isakson. He's going to talk about his race for the Senate. We'll talk about some of the hot issues going on in our nation as well and get Congressman Collins' perspective on that. But first, representing the 9th District, we do welcome back to the Means Report Congressman Collins. Congressman, thank you so much for the time. I know, we think we're busy with this broadcast. You're busy nonstop with your campaign and your service in Congress. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
All right, so for those who weren't watching your last interview on the Means Report, let me just ask you once again, just to set the table. What we have here is an election to fill the remaining time of Senator Johnny Isakson's term, who retired. We have a crowded field. Governor Kemp has the authority to appoint somebody to fill Senator Isakson's seat. When that opportunity arose, he chose the current Senator Kelly Loeffler. A lot of people thought it would be you. Why didn't the governor pick you?
That's become the best question across Georgia. Nobody understands why Governor Kemp would fly in the face of the advice he got from none other than Donald Trump, the President of the United States, who asked that he pick me on several occasions. But he chose not to. He chose to go a different direction. I believe he got bad advice from his consultants, but also I believe money was a factor in this. And he thinks undoubtedly that Senator Loeffler can use her vast wealth to convince the people of Georgia that she's somebody she's not. And I think right now that's failing. But I think that goes back to the heart of the issue, was more of a pick about money and time over really what the president had asked him to do.
Well, let me just ask you this. Let's say you're elected to the U.S. Senate, as you hope you will be. Do you have to get along with the governor back home to be a good senator?
I think the governor understood the ramifications in his pick, and I think that's why he is doing what he's doing. But look, I've always had a good relationship with the governor. He's been a constituent of mine before this ever happened. We've known each other for a long time. There'll be, I'm sure, some conversations. He wanted one. I'm going to win this race. So we'll work together fine. The people of Georgia will know that they have a senator in Washington fighting for them in all the interests of Georgia.
Why do you want to be a senator? You're building up with every passing year some good seniority in Congress, some authority in Congress. Why leave that?
Because we can't afford to leave the Senate seat in a position of learning. When I looked across this race and we were discussing it and seeing where Georgia was trending, and there needs to be a conservative voice who, number one, has a conservative record and has had a conservative record of getting things actually done, but also somebody that can continue to go to all areas of our state and understand the needs, not only of our agricultural communities, our ports and our communities on the coast, but also our suburban communities and our high-tech communities, all of which we have been working on up here in Washington, D.C. And from a Senate perspective, we didn't need a seat in which, number one, we could lose to a Democrat, but also having someone who could fight on a bigger platform for the entire state of Georgia. And that's the resume that we've built up, and we're very proud of that resume of actually getting things done and also being from Georgia, a lifelong Georgian, understanding the needs and having this seat be the focal point for what people believe about the state of Georgia.
Yeah, do you think that some of these races in the Peach State, especially yours, the other Senate race, some of these bigger races are still Republican races to lose? It feels like we're seeing a surge in recent years, maybe the past decade or so, from Democrats.
They have. I mean, we've had a lot of folks who have moved in who, frankly, haven't seen why Georgia is the great state that it is, the conservative values that have made our state. Because many times some of our elected officials, we've not been as good at explaining why the conservative governances and principles have mattered. So they bring in what I'll consider ideas from other states that's what their basis is. So what our job is to explain to them why a conservative point of view is actually what made Georgia the state that it has. I think this is still a Republican state. I think the president's still going to win Georgia. I think David Perdue is going to win his side of the Senate seat. We're going to win the other side of this Senate race. But it's going to take work. And I think all elections are about getting out and meeting people. You can't simply buy an election in Georgia, which it looks like Senator Loeffler is trying to do right now, because she won't engage people. She won't take questions. We've always been out there on the forefront of hearing from people and actually acting upon their responses, because we believe that's what a politician or somebody who's elected official ought to do.
Do you think she's doing a bad job? I know you used the word learning. Senator Loeffler is certainly just a few months into this. Do you think she's doing a bad job?
She's not had an opportunity to really do much of a job at all, so you just have to look at what she has done. And the concerns that I have in seeing what she has done, number one, she voted for an NDAA package, which actually, where she claims to be against the council culture and everything going on, she voted with Elizabeth Warren to rename monuments and rename bases such as Fort Gordon in Augusta. There's a lot of problems there. But then I look at actually because I've actually passed legislation like the First Step Act, which the president signed, which was criminal justice reform. You know, this is a big piece of legislation. We've also worked on the intellectual property stuff. We've gotten stuff into law. Two bills that Senator Loeffler has actually proposed would actually do the opposite of what she wants. One was a Second Amendment issue, which would actually make it probably harder on the issue of buying firearms. But the other one was really concerning because she's attacked me as far as not being tough enough on big tech, which is sort of crazy because I was the one that started the investigations on big tech here on the Hill. But she wrote a bill to get at that, but yet the issue with the bill and her team is she wrote a bill that actually would make it harder to take pornography and other things off of the internet. And it wasn't me that found that out. It was an article written by, unfortunately, and people may not know this, there was the porn industry journal actually said, their trade journal said this would make it harder. And so they were happy about it. So it really just shows that when you try to do stuff and not know what you're doing, it does come across wrong. So I think Senator Loeffler is unfortunately learning at the expense of Georgians.
Go back to those monuments real quick, Congressman. Are you in favor of renaming them? I know that's kind of a broad question. Maybe you're just in favor of renaming some of them. How do you feel about the overall renaming of things?
Well, my question is, where does it stop? I mean, renaming is an issue here, and the question is, where does it stop? I mean, would we go back all the way? I remember when the president was criticized by saying, well, if we continue this path, are we going to rename, the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial? And all of a sudden, I mean, it's not so crazy because that's exactly what Washington, D.C., the city up here, is wanting to do. So, look, we need to continue to be a society that ends racism, that always continues to look forward to how we bring people together, and not simply look for ideas and things that are a cancel culture that doesn't want to acknowledge past. We need to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, but also look forward to a future in which we all move together.
So what is your goal here? I mean, your serious internal campaign conversation goal. Do y'all talk about, look, we just have to make the runoff? The field is so crowded. It seems it would be difficult to get 50% plus one the first time around. Are you looking for a straight up victory in November or just to make it to the runoff?
Oh, we'd love to have a straight-up victory, but look, the reality is with 20 people in the race, you're going to have a runoff. I mean, there's 20 people. There's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Green Party. I sort of joke, anybody that had $5,000 and wanted to say they ran for the Senate, put their name on there, and so they'll actually be on the ballot. So it's sort of crazy, but in reality, there's only 3 or 4, maybe 5 if you take on 3 on the Democratic side that have a shot at getting into the runoff. So the first step is to get into the runoff, and the next step is to win November and December, winning the election on January 5th. Look, we believe we're very strong in that regard. We have endured, and this is where I talked about earlier, buying a seat. The good senator has already spent almost $30 million trying to tell the people of Georgia that I'm not a conservative or attacking me for various things, lying about me, as I've said on my own TV ads. And right now it's not working, and she knows it's not working because she has to cover up for her own past. So I think for us, it's about defining the true conservative in the race, which is myself, and someone who became a conservative when the governor tapped her to be appointed as a senator.
Our conversation with 9th District Congressman Doug Collins will continue in just a moment. We're going to cover some of the big issues facing this state and indeed facing this nation and how he would approach them if elected to the United States Senate. The Means Report will be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Means Report. We appreciate you staying with us as we continue our conversation with Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. He's running for Georgia's Senate seat, one of the 2 Senate seats that's up for grabs this election cycle. Congressman Collins, in our first segment, we talked about your reasons for running. Let's look at some of the key issues, beginning with the pandemic as it relates to Georgia. How do you think the reopening in the state is going so far?
I believe that reopening Georgia has went well. I think after we took the initial steps of getting reopened, it took a little bit of time making sure that everyone was understanding what we were trying to do. I see it opening well. I've been all over the state. In fact, I've probably traveled about 16,000 miles in the last 8 weeks in a Suburban, going to different towns and communities all over from Augusta to Bainbridge and Donaldsonville to Blue Ridge. So we're seeing it open back up. We see it a little bit slower in the cities, and that's to be expected with a little bit more urban density and people a little bit more concerned. But what I do see is Georgia getting back out. I see the economy coming back. I see our hot spots occasionally popping up, but that's to be normal. But our deaths and especially our hospitalizations are stabilizing out, and we're seeing better how to treat people. So Georgia, I think, is doing well. You see it in our economic numbers, but you're also seeing it in the ability to get schools back open. And those are exciting things because our world needs to get back to normal safely, but normal.
The president says a vaccine will come soon. Is that something that you're interested in taking when it does come out?
Probably so. I mean, I would look forward. I take my flu shot every year. I take as part of the Air Force, and being in the Air Force, we have to take those. So I'm looking forward to it. And I think the president has done an outstanding job of Operation Warp Speed, which was to say, let's get this vaccine out as quickly as possible. You know, some people have talked about that well, if it comes out quickly, it's not safe. That's just a false argument. What we have seen is when you put the resources and the prioritizations and you put other things off the table and you say, here, go fix this problem. America has some of the best scientists in the world, and I think you're going to come up with a vaccine very soon that'll actually help alleviate people's fears. It will not eliminate the virus, but it'll actually begin to allow us to get back out safely, and I'm looking forward to that as we go forward.
Tell me what you think about the vaccine as it relates to President Trump's re-election chances, your election chances. Do you think if we get that medicine before Election Day, it helps y'all win?
I think it helps. I mean, just like anything else. Remember, take away the pandemic, take away COVID crisis of this year. We started this year on a failed impeachment by the Democrats. The Democrats were miserable failures in trying to take down this president through impeachment, of which I led the charge on. Then we turn into one of the strongest economies we've seen in decades, the lowest unemployment rate that we've seen among not only the general population, but especially among African Americans and Hispanic groups. I mean, we're seeing our minimum wage. I mean, our wages going up. We saw issues of growth and job growth, and then we had the pandemic. So I think when you come back and you start seeing things get better, you see a vaccine actually come. People start seeing the sunrise mentality, as I call it, not the sunset mentality that many would like us to have. I think it will have an effect, and I think it's already having an effect. Everywhere I go, people are talking about they want it to get back to the way our economy was, and they know the quickest way to do that is through the policies of the president, and also getting a vaccine out there will help.
Do you picture that return to normal happening in the near future after a vaccine? In other words, is it too optimistic to think that 2021 we could start to feel like we used to feel before this thing?
I'm hopeful so. I think we will. I think it's going to take some time. People are going to have to get back used to going out and not being fearful. Look, the mainstream media, especially out of Washington and other places, have so put people in fear of what's happening that I think it's going to take for some a chance to get back out. But I do believe we're going to get back to normal. Remember, every pandemic that we've ever had in the world history, you have gotten back to normal. And I think that's the issue that we often forget. We do go through a time of crisis in which we do have to take safety and precautions that we need to have, but we do get back to normal. If there was not the hope of getting back to normal, then I think we'd see a lot more problems. And that's one of the concerns that I have about all the shutting down and keeping people at distances and stuff, that you're actually seeing the mental toll be a lot higher right now among groups that the physical toll has not been affected by.
Congressman Collins, what do you think about the violence that we've seen across the country in certain cities? You know, sometimes, and I guess this is part of the question, what do you think about the violence and do we have a handle on it? And number two, is it as bad as it appears? Sometimes I think, we lead the news with this gloom and doom, but it doesn't mean everybody in the nation is fighting with one another.
No, it doesn't. But I do believe that we have a problem in some of our bigger cities, Portland, Seattle. We've seen it in Chicago. We've seen it in New York. We saw it even in Atlanta. Look, the two parts that you have here, you have the idea of the issue of things that we need to protest against. And that is, if you see officers and law enforcement officers doing something wrong, then they need to be moved out. As a trooper's kid, that's always been an understanding with me. But what you're seeing in these cities is just lawlessness. It's not about a social movement. It's about criminal activity. And you're having liberal Democrat mayors and district attorneys and governors who are condoning this. So it just gets worse. Who in their right mind would want to have their city burning for over 100 and something days? But that's what we're seeing. So for me, it's about focusing on law and order. It's about backing our police departments. And all of a sudden, it's become fashionable to say defund the police and to move money other places. But when you need somebody to protect your civil liberties, your civil rights, or your life in general, you need a police officer who is trained and dedicated to do that. So for me, for those officials who want to defund the police and and to keep tearing at them, I would encourage them to get in a car, go do the job with the police, and after a few months, they believe that the police need to be funded, fine. But until then, they just need to shut up, get behind our police, and realize that they're the ones who have been helping us all along. They're the ones that keep our civil society together.
What do you think about the group Black Lives Matter and the efforts that they're undertaking across the country right now?
I think there's disruptive force, and I think their organization is based on very socialist values. I mean, if you just look at their website, that's what the values of more of an anarchist kind of state. It's really interesting you should bring up Black Lives Matter because in this Senate race, Senator Loeffler all of a sudden came out in condemning Black Lives Matter, while at the same point for the last 3 years, her basketball team has been encouraging Black Lives Matter. She actually encouraged, and with her approval, her players wore shirts, encouraged the movement going forward. So it's again, we talked about the Senate race a little bit earlier, but we come back to it here in a real life issue. You have a senator who wants to cover up the fact that she allowed, as the leader of an organization, disruption in the Black Lives Matter movement to encourage it to happen. And even last year said it was okay to protest our national anthem and protest the flag. This is something that she don't want people to know. That's why she's spending so much money trying to tell everybody what's wrong with me. The problem is she's got the things wrong with her. So I just believe that we need to put the movement out there for what it really is, and also show who is actually supporting them.
You know, I think last time you were here, we talked about when might we have sports, or will we have sports? Well, yes, we're seeing football games be played once again, but you are seeing protests and people kneeling. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch any of the games. I know you've heard about it. What do you think about those players letting their personal beliefs take center stage before the game is actually played? Are you for that or against it?
No, they need to go play football. They need to play basketball. They need to do those things. And look, everybody has every opportunity and across the town to make their own social disagreements, protest whenever they want to. But using that time, especially around our national anthem, or especially around the flag, as a veteran, someone who's been in the Iraq War, someone who's still in the military, it's just beyond comprehension for me that you would use the flag that is giving you the very freedoms to do what you want to disrespect it. I think that's just that's out of bounds. I think that, protest anywhere else. And if you want to have more of a movement, then actually get in our communities, continue to help our communities grow, and simply not have, if it's just symbolic, then it'll do nothing. We've got to have people who are willing to engage, as I've engaged and many others have engaged with our community leaders in our African American communities, our Hispanic communities, and others to say, how can we, find opportunity? How can we find ways to increase economic activities? How do we increase understanding between our police and between our different organizations that make up our communities? Those are the things that matter the most. Sports is something that we should go to and have fun at. Sports is something also that I would take away none of these athletes from being able to protest. That's their right as an American. But when they do it is also important, and it sends a very strong message, I think, that takes away from what they're trying to promote.
Let me ask you just one more question, if I may, about these protests and just the climate of our country right now. The black women in my life, whether they're coworkers or whether they're friends, acquaintances, whatever, the majority of them have said some version of this to me lately. We're scared to send our African American sons out into the world. We're scared to send them back to school. We're scared to put them behind the wheel of a car. I don't know what to say when they say that. What would you say when they say they're so filled with fear because they're afraid of what might happen to them?
Well, I think from the first part, from my days as a pastor, I would just say I would want to listen to them, and I don't want to hear their fears. And then we just talk about those fears in reality, and then begin to have a dialogue with the rest of the community. As being around the law enforcement community, being around our communities all over the state, there are good people who want to have this conversation, who want to make sure that all of our communities, whether they're African American mothers who are sending their sons out or fathers, we need to make sure that they feel just as welcome anywhere in our state as they possibly can. And that comes through dialogue. That comes through realizing that we all bring ourselves to the discussion. And when we do that, then we can listen, we can find solutions, and not just simply talk about the problem, making opportunities available. Those are the kind of things that I think would be the best thing to happen. Is it going to happen easily? No. And that's just because of where we're at over the history of our country. But we're getting better when we talk to each other.
Congressman, I only have time for a couple more questions, and I cannot let you go without the issue that's made headlines this past week. So you have the Mueller investigation looking into President Trump and his campaign's possible ties to Russia. That really doesn't get any traction when it's all said and done. Now you have come out asking or inquiring as to whether members of Mueller's team wiped their smartphones. Tell us where that stands and whether the smartphone companies, Apple in particular, can help you unwipe those phones.
Well, that's a great question. Remember, I was one of the first ones that began to sound the alarm while the Senate and others, Senate, even Republicans and others, were wanting to, protect Mueller and do the investigation. I was finding flaws that the investigation should have never been started before. It started on a false premise, and that's why it ended up so badly. But what is even worse is you had partisan hacks on the Mueller team who were only out to get the president. And then when they turned their phones back in, they had memories erased. And over 15 of them, I believe it was, they said, and real close to the time they were supposed to turn it back in, real coincidental here, they said that they lost their memory because they couldn't remember their password. Now, these are very smart lawyers. These are very smart people who think the American people are so stupid that they don't believe that they can remember their password. But here's what happens, and it's also very disturbing. It takes over 3 hours after you have set your phone to erase memory after not being able to remember your password, over 3 hours to actually have that memory erased. These people think that we're stupid. They thought we were stupid during the investigation, and the problem is we're calling them out. I hope Apple can actually help us out here, because if not, I'd love to sit them in a room and teach them that the very password they have been using for the entire investigation, all of a sudden, did you have amnesia? Do you have a medical condition that all of a sudden made you forget your password? No, not really. You were trying to hide what was on that phone, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Do you think Apple will help? They do not have a good track record when it comes to unlocking their phones when the FBI and others ask them to.
Yeah, no, I hope they will. It'd be nice if they would, but I believe is this. I encourage the Attorney General Barr to actually use their own resources, because they've unlocked these phones before through normal processes of just getting behind it. Maybe they can find out why, what they're trying to hide. My question is not what was on those phones. My question is, why are they trying to hide from the American people what was on those phones?
Well, Congressman, we certainly will continue to follow your efforts on that front and on all the issues as you continue to tackle them. I really do appreciate you being here today and spending so much time with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'll enjoy it.
Absolutely. Congressman Doug Collins, running for the United States Senate from the great state of Georgia, joining us today.